Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some nice beers from these guys over the years, and I would say that this brewery are known mainly for their sour beers, and we've had some really interesting things from that particular style bracket from them. The one that we're going to try today though is a little bit different. I have had an example of this style from them before, if memory serves me correctly, but this one is a little bit different, a little bit less hoppy. So curious to see how it turns out. Fingers crossed it's another good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Uppsala once again, which is to the north of Stockholm. Lovely city that I recommend you visit, home to Sweden's oldest university, and we're going to have a look another beer from Tempel Brygghus. So this particular beer is called Profit. It comes in at 4.5% ABV, and this one is a lager beer. From what I understand, it is supposed to be a kind of Helles type lager beer, this one. I've had this beer sitting in the fridge a month or two though. So it has been out for a little while, and I think this is one of the last lager beers that's going to be produced under the Tempel brand actually, and you'll find out for why in the history section of this video. But yeah, curious to see how it turns out. Hopefully it's another good beer, and we'll see how we go. The last lager beer I had from these guys, I'm sure, was an IPL, which was quite interesting actually. I'm sure it was like an Equinox IPL. That kind of vibe seems to have a little bit of context in my brain at the moment. But yeah, let's crack on with this one and see how we go. The Profit Lager at 4.5% ABV. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tempel Brygghus before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is massively appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Tempel Brygghus then. So Tempel Brygghus, as I've mentioned to you already, was founded back in 2014 by Arvid Landgren, and they are currently based just outside of Uppsala to the north of Stockholm. But the brewery apparently has its roots in Västerås, which is out to the west of Stockholm of course, and Arvid was originally a home brewer. But they shared premises with Jackdaw in the early stages before establishing their own facility, which is about 5 kilometres outside of Uppsala, and this facility has a capacity of around 100,000 litres of beer per year, although they had said that this could be expanded later on, and I think they did expand it from that initial number. But he's joined at the brewery by Johan Holmedal, who had previously worked for Slottkällens in Uppsala. They do some very nice beers as well. But the brewery initially specialised in sour beers, but then they started to add non-sour beers to their repertoire over the course of 2017 and up until quite recently. They also started their own beer festival in 2019, and that year they produced around 100,000 litres. But at the moment, they're starting to look at moving to a new brewery, and in 2021 they launched their new brand Singularity, which is going to focus on the more popular beer styles such as lagers and IPAs, while the Tempel brand will return to being solely focused on sour beers. But they also started to release some spirits, and they were using a distillery that Arvid designed during his parental leave, and the first releases from this came out in April of 2021, so you can get Tempel spirits as well these days. But as of July 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 155 different kinds of beer. I'm not sure if that includes the ones that have been released under the Singularity brand, but I do have one of those in the fridge that we'll take a look at in a few videos time. But yeah, if you want an IPA or a lager from these guys, then you go to Singularity. If you want the sour beers, you go to Tempel. So this is probably one of the last non-sour beers that I'll review from Tempel, which is quite interesting. But that's all I can really tell you about Tempel Brygghus for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up, as you can see, there is the Tempel Brygghus Illuminati type symbol on the side there that I always comment on every beer that I have from these guys. There you can see the artwork is pretty, you know, black metal. I always think their artwork is very much like black metal at Tempel Brygghus. Not sure if they are metalheads right enough, but I would assume so based on the style of the artwork and things. But there you can see Profit on the side. 330ml can. I think I paid about 25 Swedish kronor for this one. So that's roughly about €2.50, about £2 sterling, maybe about $3 American for those of you watching over there, just so that those of you watching in different places have a little bit of a price reference with this one. But yeah, I think this could be quite interesting. So black top on the can, as you usually get from Tempel, of course, and you can see the different stages of the moon there, which is pretty cool. So full moon, that'll be the waning gibbous and all these kind of things. Yeah, nice new moon. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. A 4.5% Helles lager beer from what I hear. So curious about this. Like I say, the last lager beer that I had from Tempel was an IPL, and I want to say it was an Equinaut IPL, come to think of it. So yeah, let's go. So I love the owl on this one, the like possessed owl. The artwork on that is absolutely beautiful. Don't know who does their artwork incidentally, but yeah, let's just line this up again so that it looks good on the camera and so that my OCD is happy. But yeah, anyway, before the head on this beer disappears, you can see that it poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head. That's fading away to be a very, very thin foamy layer, but there's a nice thicker ring around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall it looks pretty nice. As you can see, it's a very rich kind of yellow colour, this one. It's almost the same colour as like a Munich Helles or something like this, and it certainly does look the part of some kind of Helles beer. Now yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. Any barrel aging that you do and any adjuncts that you put in will also affect the colour of the beer. But when it comes to lager beers, usually it's the first 2 variables that do everything there. But yeah, nice little bit of natural haze to this beer. As I say, it looks a little bit like a kind of Munich Helles. So remember, the definition of a lager beer is a cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeast as it's also known. It takes place between 8 to 12 degrees. Then you've also got ales as well, which ferment between 15 and 18 degrees, and those are known as top fermenting yeasts, or the yeasts are, I should say. But yeah, when it comes to the lager beers, you've got quite a few different varieties. Of course, you've got the German ones and the Czech ones, I would say, are the main ones. You've got a few in Austria. But yeah, the Helles lager, of course, is the blonde lager. You get 2 different types of that. You get the Dortmunder, which is a bit more hoppy. You get the Munich one, which is a bit more bready. And of course, in the Czech Republic, you have the Svetli as well, which is a kind of blonde lager beer too. And then, of course, you've got the Pilsner, which uses a very special type of malt, and I think is usually slightly lower in alcohol actually as well. But yeah, it certainly looks the part of a nice kind of Helles Svetli type lager beer, this one. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Nothing too much more that we can say about the appearance of this beer. Ooh, that does actually smell quite nice. It's interesting, this one, because you can smell a little bit of a sort of farmhousey thing in the malt base there, but otherwise it's like a straight up Munich Helles. There's a wee bit of woodiness to this as well, and I've always found this with Tempel Brygghus's kind of regular beers, if you like. They've always got this very slightly sort of farmhousey type vibe to them. But I will say this one comes across really nicely. I've got a feeling I might enjoy this. So yeah, first impression of it is it's a nice kind of big bready, slightly farmhousey malt base that you get out of this one. It's got nice kind of soft hoppy characters. I've got a feeling that this one might be, you know, quite authentic in some ways to the kind of Munich Helles style, that more bready, yeasty kind of thing. The Czech one, shouldn't discount the Czech Svetli out of this either, because it's a bit more yeasty, and this does come across as quite a yeasty sort of Helles lager beer. So yeah, that's definitely worth taking note of with this. But yeah, you've got a nice little bit of hoppy character to it and kind of everything you would expect. But like I say, there's a wee bit of a woody, farmhousey sort of thing, but I'm finding the more that I smell of that, the more that kind of mellows out, if you will. But yeah, let's break down that aroma for you a little bit more in depth then and see how we go. So yeah, malty backbone of this beer then, as we say. It's got a nice sort of soft white bready character to it. You certainly get wee bits of kind of bread crust coming out of it. There's certainly a wee bit of a kind of more bread crusty element to this one, which is quite interesting. And then, you know, on top of that, as we say, on top of that, you can get little bits. You can feel there's a bit more of a kind of yeasty character to it as well. So you can feel you do get a good bit of that more airy kind of yeasty note in there. So kind of slightly thicker white bready notes in there, a bit of bread crust, and there's also some kind of biscuity sweetness in there. So you've got a sweet kind of more concentrated biscuity quality to it. You get a little bit of a kind of more grainy McVitie's digestive biscuit coming out of it as well. But I really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So yeah, the aroma coming out of this, I think, is pretty nice on the malty side of things. But like I say, you get a little bit of this kind of woody, slightly grainy, almost slightly earthy type vibe from the yeasty characters in this one as well. Otherwise, it's pretty straight shooting. So yeah, I like how this. I do like how this goes together. So yeah, malty yeasty side of things is very, very nice. So thumbs up to Tempel for this. I'm curious to see how that translates into the flavour. But let's focus on the hoppy part of the beer then, because the malty notes certainly do grow the more that you smell this beer. And I think it starts to develop a little bit of a slightly brown bready kind of thing as well. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, there's certainly a little bit of earthiness. This one I do get a nice little bit of a kind of earthiness in the back corners of the palate, or the back corners of the nose I should say, not the palate. We're not tasting the beer yet. I keep having these brain farts in these videos, mixing up my words for flavour and aroma. Early onset Alzheimer's, I swear. But yeah, there's a little bit of herbal quality to this one. You can certainly get a nice brighter floral aromaticity as well. But the green component of the beer, I would say overall, is quite smooth. There's a lot of a kind of wet, there's a lot of wet, grassy type character coming out of this one. So I really like how this beer, I do really like how this beer goes about its business. In that regard, it works very, very nicely, I have to say. So yeah, it's a thumbs up from me in that sense. So yeah, awesome stuff. Very, very nice. Yeah. Interesting for sure, certainly interesting. But yeah, I think that covers the kind of green component of this one. Quite wet and quite smooth. On the fruity side of things, it is pretty much what you would expect. I mean, you get a little bit of a kind of just swallowed a moustache here there, lovely. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, you get a little bit of a kind of appley. There's a little bit of a spicy apple for me. You get a little bit of that typical pear, but there's also a wee slightly sultana and apricot-y type note to this one, which is kind of quite interesting too. So you get a wee bit of dried fruit sitting underneath that, but quite an oily pear and a wee bit of a sharper apple. But the grassy notes, I think, become slightly more zesty the further that you go. The further that you go into the aftertaste with this one. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business. That's for sure. So a big thumbs up to Tempel Brygghus for this one. I think it works very, very nicely. So yeah, interesting to see how this pans out in the flavour, but take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this before you get stuck in. But anyway, this one is the Prophet, a 4.5% lager beer, a Helles lager beer of some description. I would say it from Tempel Brygghus in Uppsala, just to the north of Stockholm. Let's get stuck into this one. Potentially the last kind of regular last regular type beer that we're going to have from Tempel, because I think they're only focusing on sours now under the Tempel brand. But Singularity, I'm sure we'll have a look at soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, very straight shooting beer, that straight to the point. But yeah, a nice kind of just easy drinking lager beer. You know, sometimes this is exactly what you want. yeah, I mean, it's almost got a little bit of that kind of, you know, sort of macro, can we say macro lager type vibe to it. It's quite wet, it's quite smooth, and it's quite light, and it's just drinkable. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business in that regard. This is one of these ones that's just really, really easy to drink. And on that basis, I would complain that it's in a 330ml can, because it probably needed a 500 or a 440 at least, to be honest with you. But I think that's a solid drinkable lager beer. You know, I think usually if you start up a tap room, it's a kind of rule that you've got to have a house lager, and you know, this would be a very solid house lager, I think, for Tempel if they were to have their own bar. I do wonder if that's on the cards for them, actually opening up their own bar in Uppsala or something like that. But yeah, it's certainly quite an interesting beer, this, that's for sure. But yeah, the beer overall, I like it. I do like this one. I wouldn't hesitate to drink that again. But let's try and break down the flavour for you here. So straight away across the middle of your palate, you can feel a bit of a kind of white bready backbone there. That forms the absolute backbone of the beer. You can feel that the breadiness just kind of fluffens up a little bit the further into the aftertaste that you go with this. But as you move towards either end of that middle third of your palate, you can certainly feel there's a little bit more of a kind of bread crusty element coming out of the beer too. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. It's got a really nice malt base to it, because it's kind of like a combination of a Helles, and it's also got a bit of a Pilsner element there. So yeah, white bready base there, a little bit of a more, as we say, a little bit of a more kind of bread crusty element on top of that. Then you get a nice kind of oily, you do get a nice little bit of a more oily, biscuity sort of thing sitting on top of it. So in the middle of the palate, you can feel there's a wee bit of a kind of, you can feel that there's a wee bit of a more kind of oily, biscuity note in there. You can get a bit of that concentrated brown sugar, and then as you move further out from that, it's a little bit more kind of biscuity and things. So you get a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuit as you move out from the very centre of that palate, of your palate there, in the middle third of your tongue out to the extremities. But then you can feel, as you move from the centre of the middle third of your palate toward the back of the front half, to the back of the middle half of your palate, the middle third of your palate. Guys, my brain is terrible in this review today. So yeah, as you go from the middle of your palate, the dead centre, towards the back of that middle third of your palate, you can really feel a little bit of a kind of Pilsner malty crispness coming out of this one. So I'm pretty certain this beer has some kind of Pilsner malt in it. I think it works well. I think it does give the beer just a little bit of a kind of zip, a bit of bite, which I like. So on that note, I think that covers the kind of middle third of your palate quite well, other than to say that perhaps under the front half of the middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a slightly woody note out of the beer. But yeah, into the back half, or the back third, why do I keep doing that? Into the back third of your palate, you can feel there's a few other things going on. So on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of bready build up on this one. There's a wee bit more of an intense bread crusty note there. But the base of that back third of your palate, again, it's quite a grainy bread crusty note that you get out of that. But on top of it, there's a smoother kind of white bready note. And then on top of that, you can feel a slightly more airy, yeasty note to the beer. And it has one or two little grainy elements in it, but the aroma of the yeasty notes in this beer differ quite a bit from what you get in the flavour. It's considerably more kind of bready, and this beer finds a good kind of medium between the Czech and the German side of things, because it's got a bit more of the yeastiness that you'd expect of the Czech Svetli, but it's also got a bit more of the kind of crispness that you would expect of the various different German Helles beers. But when you start at the back of your palate with this one, you can feel that the flavour just kind of condenses down a little bit. You get that nice airy, slightly sweet bready note there, but you can feel flavours just kind of condense down a wee bit. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it it just squashes down a little bit more, and you get a bit more of a kind of condensed flavour as you go into that middle part of your palate. But on the hoppy side of things, then this one, because I think we've covered all we need to say about the malty and the yeasty side, but the back corners of the palate, there's certainly a wee bit of an earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit lighter, but you get a nice bright and slightly spicy floral aromaticity out of this one. I'd be curious to know what hops they've used in this, incidentally. But around the front curve of the palate, it's certainly a little bit lighter and more grassy, and there's a wee bit of zestiness in there. I think this one could have a little bit of Czech Sats in it, but also some kind of American hop. I think there might be a little bit of an American hop in this one as well, or Australian, some kind of New World hop, I guess we could say. But yeah, or maybe a slightly higher alpha acid German one like Hercules or Pearl or whatever. But it works. The green component of this one does work, and as you go further into the aftertaste, you get a little bit of that wetter, grassy thing that I was talking about with the aroma. But let's focus on the fruity part of the beer. So yeah, on that front third of your palate, then, as I say, that's where you get that nice. That's where you get that nice kind of more oily bubble to the beer, where you get that juicy fruity ester just rolling its way out. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a wee bit of a kind of bready build up in there. You can feel the base of that front third of your palate is kind of crisp again. I do actually feel a wee bit of the kind of Pilsner malty type vibe under there, which is quite interesting. But then on the back half of the front third of your palate, you get the more dried fruity elements. There's a wee bit of an apricot, a little bit of a kind of sultana type flavour there. But then as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your tongue, you can feel there's a bit more of an oily pear to this one, but I find this beer leans a little bit more towards a slightly spicy apple type note, and then that mixes in with all the kind of grassy elements out of this one. I wouldn't be surprised if this beer has a little bit of citra in it, actually, because it's displaying a little bit of a nice lemon limey note just mixing in with those grassy esters. It could also be a bit of Equinaut or something, because I know that Tempel like Equinaut, so it could be a little bit of that, or even Centennial. It's a little bit difficult to tell whether the lime or the lemon is a bit more dominant, and that would be the deciding factor. Centennial is lemon, Equinaut is lime. But yeah, it's quite interesting for sure. It could also be Malteke from New Zealand, if I'm remembering the name right. That one gives you a big kind of limey note as well. Motueka, that's it, sorry, Motueka. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, it could be something like that, but certainly a wee bit of a lemon limey note the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer. But yeah, slightly spicy apple, bit of pear, and a bit of sultana, and maybe apricot underneath too. So yeah, in terms of flavour, this one gives you everything you would want from a sort of Helles type lager beer. So thumbs up to Tempel Brygghus for this one. I like it. Mouthfeel wise, I would say, you know, top end of light bodied for this one, absolutely. Top end of light bodied, carbonation is very smooth. It does have a wee bit of a kind of oily slickness to it, which I really like as well. But on the on that note, you know, on that note, it's as we say, you know, that kind of oily slickness that you get out of the beer. On that note, it's it really works for it, I think. So overall, as we say, the malt base has a nice bit of smoothness and crispness to it, and a wee touch of sweetness. There's a wee bit of a yeasty note out of this one as well, as some kind of more oily and slick, fruity character, which I think works really nicely too. So yeah, it's quite a slick Helles lager beer, this one. And it has a wee bit of a kind of Czech yeasty note to it, but it's also got a little bit of a kind of Pilsner quality to it, and as well with the crispness that it develops the further you go. So yeah, a few interesting things with this. The fruits are nice and oily, and there's a wee bit of zestiness in there as well. But it certainly gets a thumbs up from me. I like this one, so thumbs up to Tempel Brygghus for this beer. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tempel Brygghus. And as I said, this one is likely to be the last sort of lager, the last kind of lager IPA type beer that we'll review from them. And you will see those kind of beers being reviewed under the Singularity brand, and I have got one of those in the fridge to take a look at as well. Also a lager beer actually, so that'll be make for an interesting comparison. But yeah, Thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tempel and from Singularity, of course. And we will return to both of these brands, I'm sure, at some point in the near future. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Check out Tempel and Singularity's social media. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. This one was the Prophet 4.5% lager beer from Tempel Brygghus in Uppsala to the north of Stockholm. Slange, skull, and cheers.